My sister asked me to be her surrogate, then told everyone I faked the miscarriage for attention. When I called her crying from the hospital, she screamed, "You unalived him! I should have picked someone else." I stayed silent. That was 11 months ago. Last week, she got served while changing her baby in a coffee shop. When my older sister found out she couldn't have kids, it broke her. I remember sitting next to her on the bathroom floor, holding her while she cried after her second failed IVF round. Because not only was it $30,000 down the drain, but it was also taking a huge emotional toll on her. I wish I had known back then how much her grief would become my responsibility. Because just 2 weeks later, she asked me if I'd ever considered being a surrogate. When I didn't say yes immediately, her tone changed. "But you're the healthiest womb in the family." "I don't know, Vanessa, I need time to think." As soon as I interrupted, she went completely silent and drove home. Apparently, "I need time to think" translated to "I'm selfish and cruel," because that evening, the family group chat exploded. My mom messaged me paragraphs about how I was breaking my sister's heart. Even my sister's husband messaged me saying, "I hope you know you're deciding whether or not my child exists." It was guilt, pressure, psychological warfare disguised as concern. I was backed into a corner and told I was holding someone's future hostage. Suddenly, I found the idea more and more appealing. After all, it was only 9 months of discomfort, right? I told myself I'd be proud to give her the one thing she wanted most in the world. I told myself family comes first. So I became her surrogate. The injections were rough. I was bloated, nauseous, and tired all the time. But I smiled through it all, not for me, but for my sister, because she was glowing, finally excited again. I was on my way to her house for the gender reveal party, when suddenly, a truck was driving dangerously close to me on the highway. I kept my distance, but as we made eye contact, I noticed the beer bottles that littered his car floor, the faraway look in his eyes. And that's when I knew he was drunk, like really drunk. And as soon as the realization hit me, so did the truck. Before I knew it, red was leaking onto my seat and I dialed 911. I rushed to the hospital, but I already knew. My body felt empty. I could feel my heart already shattered and mourning what was lost. But I still remember the moment the doctor confirmed it, that there was no heartbeat. I'd lost the baby. I stared at the monitor for almost an hour, watching stillness where there had once been life. But above all, I blamed myself. My fingers trembled as I dialed my sister's number, but instead of comforting me, she screamed at the top of her lungs, "You unalived my baby! You psychotic beach! I should have picked someone else!" As she continued to scream, I was too stunned to reply. I'd just gone through a trauma, and all she could think about was herself. She didn't even ask how I was feeling. Not once. She stopped talking to me that day, blocked me on everything. And maybe if she stopped there, I wouldn't care. But no. The next morning, I woke up to dozens of texts from my mom and numbers I didn't have saved. They all said the same thing, just variations of them calling me a POS or an attention-seeking W word. You see, she had told our entire family that I'd faked the miscarriage for attention, that I was never pregnant in the first place. She claimed I had mental health issues and made it all up to stay in the spotlight. I assumed that people would see through it, but they didn't. My uncle called to say, "You're an effing disgrace," before hanging up. One of my cousins, who I'd been close with since we were kids, messaged me to say, "You were born jealous. That's why no one trusts you." And even though they hurt a little, I honestly didn't care, because the pain of losing my literal baby was 1,000 times worse than anything some idiots wanted to say to me. In fact, it made what they were saying look like a walk in the park. But still, it somehow didn't end there. 3 days later, I got a call from HR at my job. Someone had reported me anonymously, saying I'd stolen fertility medication from a family member and forged medical documents to keep taking paid time off. I had to sit through a humiliating investigation. I handed over every document, every prescription, every message from my doctor to prove I wasn't some deranged liar. That was the moment I realized my sister wasn't just angry. She wanted to ruin me. But she forgot one thing. She'd left a trail. I had screenshots of our conversations, voice memos where she thanked me for carrying the baby, text messages confirming everything. So I compiled it all. I sent it to every family member who had doubted me. I laid it all out, calmly and methodically. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on the door. It was some random man. He asked if I was ready for our date. I furrowed my brows and told him he had the wrong person. Throughout the day, this happened 2 more times. And then I finally figured it out. My sister had made a fake dating account for me. And in my bio was my address captioned with DTF whenever just knock. I was seeing red. This wasn't just about the baby anymore. This was about destroying my life. And I realized I needed to protect myself before things got even worse. I immediately called the police to report the fake dating profile. The officer who showed up seemed bored, taking notes without much interest. His weathered face barely registered emotion as I frantically explained the situation. He told me it was a civil matter, since there was no direct threat, his pen tapping impatiently against his notepad. I tried explaining that random men were showing up at my door at all hours, some aggressive when I wouldn't let them in. But he just shrugged and suggested I be more careful online. The dismissive tone in his voice made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream that I hadn't even created the profile, that someone was deliberately trying to put me in danger, but I knew it wouldn't help. His mind was already made up. After he left, I sat on my couch feeling completely helpless, the silence of my apartment suddenly oppressive. My phone kept buzzing with texts from unknown numbers, some creepy, some angry when I didn't respond. The screen lit up every few minutes with another notification, each one making my stomach clench tighter. I turned it off and just cried for what felt like hours, my body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside me. I was still recovering physically from the accident, the lingering pain in my abdomen a constant reminder, emotionally from losing the baby that wasn't mine but that I'd already started to love, and now I had to deal with this too. It felt like drowning with no one willing to throw me a lifeline. The next morning, my eyes swollen and throat raw, I called my friend Riley, who works in IT. She's always been my go-to person for practical solutions. She came over that evening, her laptop bag slung over her shoulder and determination in her eyes. She helped me secure all my accounts, change passwords, and report the fake dating profile. The process took hours, each website having different reporting procedures, most of them frustratingly inadequate. She also suggested I install a security camera outside my apartment door, her voice gentle but firm. "You need to protect yourself," she said, scrolling through options on her laptop. "These aren't just pranks anymore." I ordered one right away, the most highly rated model I could afford, and Riley helped me set it up the next day, carefully positioning it to capture anyone approaching my door. "This is messed up," she said while mounting the camera, standing on a chair in her sock feet. "Your sister needs serious help, like professional intervention kind of help." I nodded, too exhausted to even talk about it anymore. The constant vigilance was draining me. Riley was one of the few people who believed me from the start. She'd seen the hospital photos, the discharge papers with my name clearly printed at the top. She'd visited me during my recovery, bringing soup and magazines while I healed. She knew I wasn't making anything up. 2 days after installing the camera, I got a notification on my phone while at work. The sudden ping made my heart race. Someone was at my door. I excused myself from a meeting, hands trembling as I opened the app and watched in real time as a hooded figure threw eggs at my front door, the yellow yolks dripping down the wood, then spit on the welcome mat my mother had given me as a housewarming gift. The person was wearing a mask, but I recognized the distinctive purple hoodie with the university logo on the back. It belonged to Vanessa's teenage goddaughter, Zoe. I'd seen her wearing it at family gatherings, had even complimented her on it once. Now here she was, vandalizing my home on Vanessa's behalf. I saved the footage but didn't confront anyone. What was the point? They'd just deny it or twist it somehow, make me seem paranoid or attention-seeking. Instead, I created a folder on my computer labeled insurance and stored the video there, along with all my other evidence. Screenshots of the fake dating profile, copies of the harassing messages, photos of men who had shown up at my door. It was becoming a digital archive of my sister's hatred. A week later, my landlord, Mr. Patel, called. His voice sounded strained as he explained that he'd received multiple anonymous complaints about me. Someone claimed I was running an escort service from my apartment, a ridiculous accusation that would have been laughable if it weren't so dangerous. They reported noise violations, unfamiliar male visitors at odd hours, even sent edited footage from the building's hallway cameras that tried to paint me as unstable. The thought of someone monitoring the building cameras, watching me come and go, made me feel physically ill. "I know you for 3 years," Mr. Patel said, his accent thickening with discomfort. "I don't believe these things. You are quiet tenant, always pay on time. But if complaints continue, management company will force my hand." I thanked him for the warning, my stomach sinking to somewhere around my knees. I was one complaint away from eviction. That's when I realized Vanessa wasn't trying to win. She wasn't just angry or grieving. She was trying to erase me. She wanted me gone, homeless, jobless, friendless. This wasn't just anger anymore. This was calculated destruction, a systematic dismantling of my entire life. That night, I couldn't sleep. The shadows in my apartment seemed to shift and move as I tossed and turned, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I kept thinking about how quickly my life had unraveled. Just months ago, I was doing something I thought was kind and selfless. I remembered how excited I'd been to tell Vanessa I'd be her surrogate, how I'd imagined us growing closer through the experience. Now I was fighting to keep a roof over my head, jumping at every noise outside my door. I scrolled through old photos on my phone, family holidays where we'd worn matching pajamas, sister trips with Vanessa where we'd shared hotel beds and secrets, birthday celebrations where she'd always made sure I had my favorite cake. Had she always hated me? Was I just too blind to see it? Or had something fundamental broken inside her when the baby died, something that couldn't be repaired? The next morning, eyes gritty from lack of sleep, I decided I needed help beyond what Riley could provide. I joined some online forums for surrogates and women who'd experienced pregnancy loss. The communities were active and supportive, with thousands of members sharing their experiences. I posted my story anonymously, careful to omit identifying details, asking for advice. The responses were overwhelming. So many women shared similar experiences, not with the harassment, but with the grief, the blame, the feeling of failure after a miscarriage. Their stories poured in, each one a testament to the complicated emotions surrounding surrogacy and pregnancy loss. One user, SurroSister28, whose profile picture showed a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, suggested I speak to a lawyer who specialized in harassment cases. She sent me a name, Priya Sharma. I wasn't ready to sue anyone, especially not my own sister, but I needed to know my options. I called and scheduled a consultation, the receptionist's professional tone somehow reassuring. Ms. Sharma's office was small but professional, with certificates on the walls and a desk so neat it looked staged. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened carefully as I showed her my evidence folder, the texts, the voice memos, the security footage, the dating profile screenshots. She took notes in a leather-bound notebook and occasionally asked questions, her face remaining neutral, though I caught a flash of something like anger when I showed her the dating profile. "This is textbook harassment," she finally said, setting down her pen with a decisive click. "You have grounds for a restraining order at minimum, possibly a civil suit for defamation and emotional distress. The dating profile alone constitutes identity theft in some jurisdictions." I shook my head, my throat tight. "I don't want to sue my sister. I just want her to stop. I want my life back." Ms. Sharma nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Then let's develop a strategy. Document everything. Save every message. Record every incident. If you receive threats, report them to police immediately, even if they seem dismissive. Creating a paper trail is crucial, and consider writing a cease and desist letter. Sometimes official letterhead is enough to make someone reconsider their actions." I left her office with a plan, not to attack, but to defend. I felt slightly more in control, even though nothing had actually changed yet. The weight on my shoulders seemed marginally lighter as I walked to my car, the spring sunshine warming my face. That evening, I received a message from a stranger on Instagram. Her name was Tara, and she claimed to be part of a private surrogacy support group online. Her profile showed a woman with curly hair and a warm smile, but her message was anything but warm. She sent screenshots that made my blood run cold. Vanessa had anonymously posted her story in the group, how her jealous sister had volunteered to be her surrogate, then deliberately caused a miscarriage out of spite. She claimed I'd been reckless during the pregnancy, ignored doctor's orders, and then faked the car accident to cover it all up. The lies were so specific, so detailed, that they almost sounded plausible if you didn't know the truth. I created a burner account and joined the group, watching in horror as dozens of women comforted Vanessa for surviving such a cruel betrayal. They called me a monster without even knowing my name. One woman wrote that people like me didn't deserve to have a womb. Another suggested Vanessa should press charges for fetal endangerment. The comments went on and on, each one more vicious than the last, all directed at a version of me that didn't exist. I felt sick reading it all, physically nauseated by the hatred directed at me. The lies were so elaborate, so specific. Vanessa described how I'd supposedly confessed to her that I'd been drinking and taking medications throughout the pregnancy. She even claimed I'd admitted to being jealous of her marriage and wanting to hurt her. She painted a picture of herself as the forgiving sister who had tried to understand my mental health issues, but had to protect herself from my dangerous behavior. It was a masterclass in manipulation. The worst part was that Vanessa was gaining popularity in these circles. She'd been invited to speak on a podcast about surrogacy trauma. She was being treated like some brave survivor, while I was painted as a villain who got away with murder. Her posts received hundreds of supportive comments, heart emojis, and offers of help. People were sending her care packages and messages of support. She was thriving on the attention. I noticed she'd even scored a small brand deal with a pregnancy tea company that had reached out after hearing her story. They were sending her free products to help heal and asking her to post about them. It made me furious seeing her profit from lies about me. The company's Instagram showed Vanessa holding their products, smiling sadly into the camera, hashtags about healing and strength beneath the image. Without thinking too much, I sent an anonymous email to the tea company. No drama, no accusations. I just wrote, "You might want to ask Vanessa Johnson for medical records confirming her surrogacy story before partnering with her." Then I attached proof. The hospital records showing I was the one who'd been pregnant. The accident report with details of my injuries. The surrogacy contract with both our signatures clearly visible. My hands shook as I hit send, but I felt a grim satisfaction knowing I was finally fighting back, even if anonymously. Within 48 hours, the tea company had quietly removed all mentions of Vanessa from their social media. She was dropped from the partnership without any public announcement. I felt a small sense of satisfaction seeing that at least someone had seen through her lies, had recognized the truth when presented with evidence. But Vanessa must have figured out what happened, because she retaliated almost immediately. She somehow got hold of private photos of me during my hormone injection phase, ones she must have taken without my permission when she was still pretending to be supportive. They weren't flattering. I was bloated, my stomach bruised from the shots, my face puffy from medications. I looked exhausted and unwell, which of course I was. The hormone treatments had been brutal. She posted them on her Instagram story with captions like, "Fake people can still take real shots," and "Some people will do anything for attention." She never used my name, but anyone who knew us would recognize me. It was humiliating. I imagined my coworkers seeing those photos, my friends, even the barista at my local coffee shop who always remembered my order. The thought made me want to hide in my apartment forever. That was the final straw. I'd tried to be reasonable. I'd tried to keep things private, but she kept escalating, kept attacking. So I made a 4-minute video, no names, no commentary, just dates, screenshots, a copy of the surrogacy contract with our signatures, the ER miscarriage report with my name clearly visible, voice memos of Vanessa thanking me for carrying the baby, telling me how grateful she was, the security footage of her goddaughter vandalizing my apartment, text messages from unknown men who had found me through the fake dating profile. I posted it on Reddit with the title, "My sister asked me to be her surrogate, then tried to destroy my life after I lost the baby." I didn't expect much, maybe some advice or support from strangers. I certainly didn't expect it to go viral locally. First, didn't even include our city, but somehow people figured it out. Within 24 hours, the post had thousands of upvotes. People from our hometown recognized the story. Friends, coworkers, extended family all saw it. Some reached out to me privately, apologizing for believing Vanessa. Others remained silent, probably embarrassed by how quickly they'd turned on me. A few doubled down, insisting I was the one twisting the narrative. The local gossip mill was working overtime. My phone started blowing up with notifications, text messages, calls, social media alerts. It was overwhelming. I turned it off, suddenly anxious about what I'd done. Had I just stooped to her level? Was I now the one seeking attention? I spent the night tossing and turning, wondering if I'd made things worse, if I'd just poured gasoline on an already raging fire. The next morning, I woke up to an email from someone named Alex. They claimed to be a former friend of Vanessa's who had seen my Reddit post. The message was sympathetic but cautious, as if they were afraid of getting involved. Attached was a screen recording from Vanessa's private spam Instagram account, one only her closest friends could see. On it, she'd been mocking the miscarriage for months, bragging about manipulating a hormonal B-word into silence, and joking about how easy it was to turn the family against me. She shared screenshots of family members criticizing me in group chats I wasn't part of, laughing about how isolated I'd become. In one particularly cruel post, she'd written, "Imagine being so pathetic you can't even keep a baby alive for 9 months. Not that I'm complaining. Now I can find a surrogate who isn't a complete failure." The post had laughing emojis and supportive comments from her inner circle. They were all in on it, all laughing at my pain, at the loss of a child I had carried for her. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just about her grief anymore. This wasn't a sister lashing out in pain. This was malice. Pure, calculated malice. And she'd been planning it for months, cultivating allies, turning people against me systematically while pretending to be the victim. I compiled everything into a clean, organized Google Drive folder. Posts, messages, timestamps, medical records, everything. I didn't add any commentary. The facts spoke for themselves. Then I sent the link to Vanessa's employer, a marketing firm where she was a senior manager. No caption, no explanation, just the evidence. I knew it was a nuclear option, but I was done being the only one facing consequences. Within a week, Vanessa was quietly let go from her job. I only found out because Riley's boyfriend worked at the same company and mentioned it in passing. Apparently, they cited violation of company values and concerns about professional conduct. They didn't publicly connect it to her harassment campaign against me, but the timing made it obvious. Part of me felt guilty, but a larger part felt vindicated. For the first time in months, there was a consequence for her actions, not mine. 2 months later, I heard through family gossip that Marcus had moved out. No one knew exactly why, but my cousin Jen, who was speaking to me again after seeing the evidence, mentioned that he'd been horrified when he discovered the full extent of what Vanessa had done. Apparently, he'd believed her initially because she'd only shown him selective pieces of the story. When he saw everything, he couldn't stay. I imagined him packing his bags, the realization dawning that the woman he married wasn't who he thought she was. I felt sorry for him, despite everything. Vanessa spiraled online, posting unhinged rants blaming cancel culture and trauma vultures for her problems. She claimed she was being persecuted for speaking her truth. Her followers gradually disappeared. Her stories dried up. The podcasts stopped inviting her. The carefully constructed victim narrative was crumbling, and she didn't know how to exist without it. I never clapped back, never gloated. I just focused on rebuilding my life, steadily, quietly. I found a new apartment in a secure building with better management, a place with large windows and a small balcony where I could grow herbs. I threw myself into work and got a promotion, the distraction of challenging projects a welcome relief. I started therapy to process both the miscarriage and the betrayal, slowly unpacking the trauma with a compassionate professional. Slowly, I began to heal, the raw wound becoming a scar that ached less each day. Some family members tried to pressure me into reconciling with Vanessa. My mom called one day, suggesting we all get together for dinner to put this ugliness behind us. Her voice was hopeful, but strained, the peacemaker, trying to restore harmony without addressing the cause of the discord. I declined politely but firmly. There are some bridges that, once burned, should stay ashes. About a year after everything happened, I was sitting at a cafe when I spotted Vanessa across the street. She looked different, thinner, more subdued, her once perfect appearance slightly disheveled. For a moment, our eyes met through the window. I thought she might come in, might try to talk to me. Instead, she quickly turned and walked away. Her pace hurried as if fleeing something. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, not even pity. Just emptiness where our relationship used to be. That evening, I got one message from my mother. It was short, but said everything. "You were right. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I just closed my laptop and smiled. Not because justice was served, but because I had survived. I had protected myself when no one else would. The healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. I still had nightmares about the accident, still felt phantom pains where the baby had been. Some mornings I woke up with my hand on my stomach, momentarily confused about why it was flat. But I was moving forward, one day at a time, reclaiming pieces of myself that had been lost in the chaos. Then one morning, I received a letter. No return address, just my name written in familiar handwriting. Inside was a check for $30,000, the exact amount of the IVF treatment, and a note that simply said, "I can't take back what I did, but I can return what you gave." It was signed by Marcus, not Vanessa. I recognized his neat, precise script from birthday cards and Christmas tags. I stared at the check for a long time, unsure what to do with it. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to reject anything connected to that painful time, but another part recognized it for what it was, an acknowledgement of the sacrifice I'd made, the trauma I'd endured. It wasn't an apology from the person who had hurt me most, but it was something. A recognition that what happened was real, that my suffering mattered. In the end, I deposited the check and donated half to a pregnancy loss support organization. The rest I put toward a trip I'd always wanted to take but never thought I could afford. 2 weeks in Japan, exploring temples and gardens, losing myself in a culture where no one knew my story. It felt right somehow, using that money to build something new, rather than dwelling on what was lost. Around this time, I also reconnected with an old friend, Damien, who had reached out after seeing my Reddit post. He'd gone through something similar with his brother, not a surrogacy situation, but a family betrayal that had left him isolated and doubting himself. We started meeting for coffee, then dinner, then more. He understood my trust issues, never pushed for more than I could give. His patience was a balm, his understanding a gift I hadn't expected to receive. 6 months into our relationship, we were having dinner when he asked about Vanessa. I realized I hadn't thought about her in weeks. The anger that had once consumed me had faded to a dull ache, then to something like indifference. I told him I hoped she'd found help, found peace, but that I had no interest in having her in my life again. "Some people show you who they are in a crisis," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "and you have to believe them." I nodded, thinking how true that was. The accident had revealed Vanessa's true character, just as it had shown me my own strength. I'd never imagined I could survive something like this, but here I was, not just surviving, but building something new from the ruins. Last week, I ran into my cousin Jen at the grocery store. After awkward small talk about the weather and her new job, she mentioned that Vanessa was pregnant. Apparently, they'd found a new surrogate, a woman they were paying this time, not family. The baby was due in 3 months. I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that she hadn't asked another family member, concern for the surrogate, a distant echo of the grief I'd carried. "She's different now," Jen said hesitantly, examining a display of apples with too much interest. "The therapy helped. She talks about you sometimes, about how she wishes she could take it all back." I nodded but said nothing. Maybe Vanessa had changed. Maybe therapy and time had helped her see the damage she'd done. Or maybe she was just telling people what they wanted to hear. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. As I was checking out, Jen asked if I would consider reaching out to Vanessa for closure. I smiled and shook my head, the answer coming easily. I have my closure, I told her. I hope she finds hers. And I meant it. The best revenge wasn't watching Vanessa lose her job or her marriage. It wasn't exposing her lies or making her face consequences. The best revenge was moving on, building a life so full and rich that what happened became just a chapter in my story, not the whole book. Sometimes I still think about the baby I carried, what they might have looked like, who they might have become. I don't regret being a surrogate. I regret trusting someone who saw my generosity as weakness, my grief as an opportunity for manipulation. But those regrets don't define me anymore. What defines me is what I did after, how I stood up for myself when no one else would, how I refused to be erased or silenced, how I rebuilt from the ashes of what was lost. Last month, I started volunteering with a support group for surrogates. I share my story not to warn them away from helping family, but to help them establish boundaries, recognize red flags, protect themselves legally and emotionally. Every time I speak, I feel a little lighter, a little stronger. The women listen intently, ask questions, sometimes share their own fears. It feels good to transform my pain into something useful, something that might spare someone else. Yesterday, I received an invitation to my cousin's wedding. Vanessa will be there, of course. A year ago, I would have declined immediately, unwilling to be in the same room as her. Now, I'm considering going, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to show myself how far I've come, that I can occupy the same space without letting her presence diminish mine. I don't know if I'll ever have children of my own. The experience left me with complicated feelings about pregnancy and motherhood, but I do know that whatever path I choose, it will be mine, not shaped by guilt or manipulation or family pressure, but by what I truly want. And that, I think, is the real victory. Not just surviving Vanessa's campaign to destroy me, but emerging from it with a clearer sense of who I am and what I deserve. The sister I thought I knew is gone, if she ever existed at all, but I'm still here, stronger, wiser, and finally, truly free. I decided to go to the wedding. It took a lot of mental preparation, but I wasn't going to let Vanessa control my life anymore. I bought a new dress, something that made me feel confident, but not like I was trying too hard. The night before, I barely slept, my mind racing with all the possible scenarios of how seeing Vanessa might go. The ceremony itself was beautiful. I sat in the back, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible. I spotted Vanessa across the room, her baby bump visible under her flowy dress. She was about 7 months along now, according to what I'd heard through the family grapevine. I kept my distance, focusing on the bride and groom instead of the knot in my stomach. During the reception, I stuck close to Riley, who'd come as my +1. She kept making jokes about the terrible DJ and the dried chicken, anything to keep my mind off the elephant in the room. I was at the bar getting another soda when I felt someone approach. I turned around and there was Marcus, Vanessa's husband. Ex-husband? I wasn't sure where they stood now. "Hey," he said awkwardly. "You look good." I thanked him for the check he'd sent. He nodded, looking uncomfortable, then told me he and Vanessa were officially divorced. Apparently, after everything came out, he couldn't look at her the same way. He'd moved to an apartment across town and was trying to figure out his role with the baby on the way. I felt bad for him, caught in the middle of Vanessa's mess. As we were talking, I noticed Vanessa watching us from across the room. The look on her face wasn't anger like I expected. It was something else. Something almost like shame. She quickly looked away when our eyes met. I managed to avoid any direct interaction with Vanessa for most of the night, but as I was leaving, she cornered me near the coat check. My heart immediately started racing, my fight-or-flight response kicking in hard, but she didn't yell or accuse me of anything. She just stood there, one hand on her belly, looking smaller somehow. "I'm seeing someone," she said quietly. "A therapist, I mean. Twice a week." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. She didn't apologize, didn't ask for forgiveness, just shared that one piece of information before walking away. It wasn't much, but it was something. A tiny acknowledgement that things had gone very wrong. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter somehow. Seeing Vanessa hadn't been as catastrophic as I'd feared. I'd survived it, just like I'd survived everything else. I went about my day, had coffee with Damien, worked on a project for my job. Normal stuff that once seemed impossible during the worst of everything. A week later, I got a text from my mom asking if I'd meet her for lunch. I was hesitant, but agreed. Our relationship had been strained ever since everything happened. She'd apologized, but there was still this awkwardness between us, like neither of us knew how to be around each other anymore. We met at this little cafe near her house. She looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin as we ordered. Finally, she took a deep breath and told me Vanessa had been diagnosed with something called adjustment disorder, with anxiety and depressed mood. Apparently, the failed IVF treatments had triggered it, and then the miscarriage made it worse. She wasn't excusing what Vanessa did. She made that clear, but she wanted me to understand that Vanessa hadn't been herself. I sat there, absorbing this information. Part of me wanted to say, no kidding, she wasn't herself. Normal people don't try to destroy their sister's life. But I kept that thought to myself. Instead, I just asked if Vanessa was getting help. Mom nodded, saying the therapy seemed to be working. She was on medication too. As we were finishing lunch, Mom hesitantly mentioned that Vanessa had asked if I would consider meeting with her and her therapist. A mediated conversation of sorts. I immediately tensed up. The thought of sitting in a room with Vanessa, talking about everything that happened, made my stomach churn. I told Mom I'd think about it, but I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. That night, I talked it over with Damien. He listened without judgment as I worked through my feelings. He pointed out that I didn't owe Vanessa anything, not even a conversation. But he also said that sometimes these mediated discussions can provide closure. The decision was entirely mine. I spent the next few days thinking about it. I made a pro-con list like some kind of middle schooler trying to decide whether to go to a dance. In the end, curiosity won out. I wanted to hear what Vanessa had to say. I wanted to know if she truly understood the damage she'd done. So I agreed to one session, with conditions. It would be on my terms, at a time that worked for me, and I could leave at any point if I felt uncomfortable. The day of the meeting, I was a nervous wreck. I changed my outfit 3 times, as if what I wore would somehow protect me. Damien drove me to the therapist's office and waited in the car, my safety net if things went south. The waiting room was quiet, just the sound of a white noise machine and soft classical music. When the door opened, I saw Vanessa already sitting inside. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. The therapist, Dr. Chen, explained the ground rules. This wasn't about forcing reconciliation or forgiveness. It was about communication and understanding. Vanessa would speak first, then I would have a chance to respond. We could take breaks at any time. Vanessa started by acknowledging everything she'd done, not in vague terms, but specifically. The fake dating profile, the lies to family, the harassment at my job, the photos she'd shared without permission. She didn't make excuses or try to minimize it. She just laid it all out, her voice shaking at times. Then she explained what had been happening in her head. How after the second failed IVF, something broke inside her. How when I lost the baby, all she could see was another failure, another thing taken from her. She'd created this narrative where I was the villain because it was easier than facing her grief and disappointment. The more people believed her, the more real it became in her mind. It was like she'd convinced herself of her own lies. I wanted someone to blame, she said, tears running down her face. And you were there. I sat silently, letting her words sink in. When it was my turn to speak, I found it hard to find the right words. I told her how scared I'd been, how alone, how betrayed by not just her, but everyone who believed her without question. I told her about the nights I couldn't sleep, jumping at every noise outside my door, about the humiliation of defending myself against accusations that never should have existed. You didn't just attack me, I said. You tried to erase me. She nodded, not denying anything. The therapist guided us through the conversation, stepping in when things got too heated, or when one of us needed a moment. It wasn't some magical healing session. There were no hugs or tearful reconciliations like in the movies, just 2 broken people trying to understand how we'd ended up here. At the end of the session, Vanessa asked if I would consider meeting again. I told her honestly that I didn't know. I needed time to process everything. Dr. Chen suggested I take as much time as I needed, that there was no rush or pressure. I left feeling emotionally drained but somehow clearer, like a fog had lifted. Over the next few weeks, I thought a lot about that session, about Vanessa's explanation and whether it changed anything for me. I talked it through with my own therapist, trying to sort out my feelings. The anger was still there, but it wasn't as all-consuming as before. It had edges now, boundaries I could see around. I decided to meet with Vanessa and Dr. Chen one more time, not for Vanessa's sake, but for my own. I had questions that still needed answers, things I needed to say to fully move on. The second session was different, less emotional, more practical. We talked about boundaries, about what any future relationship between us might look like. I made it clear that trust would have to be rebuilt from the ground up, and that might take years, if it happened at all. Vanessa gave birth to a healthy baby boy a month later. Mom sent me a picture, asking if I wanted to visit. I wasn't ready for that. I sent a gift, a soft blanket and a card that simply said, "Congratulations," but kept my distance. Some wounds were still too fresh. Life went on. Damien and I moved in together, combining our book collections and arguing good-naturedly about whose coffee maker to keep. I got promoted at work, taking on a leadership role I'd been eyeing for years. I continued volunteering with the surrogate support group, sharing my story to help others protect themselves. 6 months after our therapy sessions, Vanessa texted me directly for the first time. She asked if I would be willing to meet her for coffee. Just the 2 of us, no mediator. I was surprised by how long I stared at that message, unsure how to respond. Finally, I agreed to meet at a public place, a cafe equidistant between our homes. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with her baby asleep in a carrier beside her. She looked tired but calmer than I'd seen her in years. We made awkward small talk at first. The weather, my new job, her adjustment to motherhood. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "I've been working on this with Dr. Chen," she said, sliding it across the table. "You don't have to read it now, or ever, if you don't want to." It was a letter, 8 pages, handwritten, a real apology, not the kind that says, "I'm sorry you felt that way," but one that took full responsibility. She detailed everything she'd done, acknowledged the hurt she'd caused, and outlined the steps she was taking to make sure she never did anything like that again. No excuses, no justifications, just accountability. I read it twice, sitting there in the cafe while my coffee got cold. It didn't magically fix everything, but it mattered. It was the first time I truly believed she understood the impact of her actions. "Thank you for this," I said finally, folding the letter carefully. "It means a lot." We didn't hug when we parted ways. We weren't ready for that. But there was a moment, just before she left, when she looked at me and said, "I miss who we used to be." I nodded, because I missed that too. Not enough to pretend the past year hadn't happened, but enough to leave the door cracked open, just a little. Over the next year, we built something new. Not the close sisterhood we once had, but something more cautious. Coffee every few weeks. Short texts about nothing important. She respected my boundaries, never pushed for more than I was willing to give. I met her son properly, held him while she made us lunch. He had her eyes but none of her sharp edges. The family slowly healed too. Holiday gatherings became less tense, though there were still moments of awkwardness. Some relatives never fully understood what had happened between us, preferring to believe it was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. I let them think what they wanted. The people who mattered knew the truth. Damien proposed on our 2-year anniversary. Nothing fancy, just the 2 of us on the balcony of our apartment, surrounded by my thriving herb garden. I said yes immediately. me. When I called mom to share the news, she asked if Vanessa would be in the wedding party. I told her no, that wasn't where we were yet, maybe never would be. She accepted that without argument, a small victory in itself. Last week, I ran into Marcus at the grocery store. He was doing well, dating someone new, still co-parenting with Vanessa. He mentioned that she talks about me sometimes, about how much she regrets what happened. She's not the same person, he said, loading apples into his cart. The therapy changed her. I believe that's true. People can change if they want to badly enough, but change doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't undo damage. It just creates a new starting point, a different path forward. Sometimes I think about the baby I lost, not with the sharp pain of before, but with a gentle sadness for what might have been. I've made peace with that loss as much as anyone can. I've made peace with a lot of things. I don't know what the future holds for me and Vanessa. I don't know if we'll ever fully repair what was broken, but I do know that I'm okay either way. I survived the worst she could do. I rebuilt my life on my terms. I found happiness that doesn't depend on her approval or acceptance. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything.